Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Welcome back to Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham. This is our Blended Family podcast. And today, we're going to talk about money. And here's why we're going to talk about it, because not just in blended families, but in every family, if you were to list the top 3 concerns with most families, top 3 reasons for divorce, money's always going to be in those top 3. So we're going to talk about it, but we're going to do it in a very practical way. And I want you to feel comfortable with this, because I want you to know that in my work life, outside of podcast and outside of the blended family, I'm a financial planner. This is what I do. I work with families all the time on the issues that I'm going to walk through. So we're not going to deal with every aspect of money, but we're going to deal with some practical guides that I want you to jot down and discuss together, okay? So we're just going to jump right in and talk about being smart with your money. And I want to give you some categories, because I want you to consider a family budget. Now, I don't tell all of my clients that they should make a family budget, but most should, because they struggle with controlling different areas of their money. And so if that's the case, then here's a practical guide to a family budget. Now, you're going to be surprised in a few minutes at a few of the things that I'm going to say, because they're going to go against traditional thinking, because in our firm and how I think, we use math. And not all of the suggestions you get are based on math. So, for an example, if you had extra money, should you pay your car off? If you have extra money, should you pay your house off? Maybe not. Maybe not. So hold on to that. I'll come back to it. Here are the categories. First of all, when you divide up your money and you're making this family budget, you're going to begin with the essential expenses. That's probably 50% of your budget. So do some calculations with the two of you together, you and your spouse. Is 50% of your budget expenses? I'm talking about housing, utilities, your phone, your internet, groceries, childcare. Those are the essential expenses. So that's where you begin. You make a list of those things. You calculate the cost. But this is what I want you to do. If you're real serious about money not being an issue in your marriage, then I want you to assign a percentage to how much of your income is going to essential expenses. Don't want it to be over 50%. All right, here's the second category. We go from essential expenses to wants. We all have wants. I think you ought to pencil wants into your budget, because it's obvious that we're going to do it anyways. And so what are wants? Clothing, eating out. Anyone out there guilty of eating out too much besides me? Yeah, I have those same wants. Dining out, that's a want. Entertainment, we love going to the movies. Entertainment, you ought to do those things. They're important to have fun together. Things extra you do for the kids, I know you want to do those things. It's a little more difficult sometimes in a blended family, because as some of you know, if you do something for your biological child, the step parent may roll their eyes at it. But we put them into the budget so that it doesn't become an issue. So how much of your budget, what percent? Remember, we're assigning percentages. You got 50% for essentials. How much of your budget should go to wants? 30%. Okay? 30%. Now we're down to 20% left. We got 50 in essentials, 30 in our wants, like clothing and eating out, those kinds of things, enjoying ourselves. Now what's left? Debt repayment. That's the third category, debt repayment. So when I talk about debt repayment, obviously you have a house payment. Most people do. Most people have an auto payment. That's okay. Most people are paying money on credit cards. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. So, how much of your money should go to debt repayment? 20%, assign a percentage. Now, why am I such a stickler when I'm working with my clients to assign a percentage to these categories? Because here's what I see. I see people spending the money on the essentials. You got to do that. Maybe their wants gets a little too high above that 30%. But what I really see is they get into way too much debt. And when I say that your debt ought not be more than 20%, if your debt is 30%, listen, I have people come to my office whose debt is 50% of their budget. 50% of their income goes to debt. I'm going to give you an example. I had an attorney come into my office. She wanted to go through our process. She's sitting down at our conference table. I'm sitting at the conference table, and we're walking through her financial situation. And you got to be honest. It's like you're opening up this junk drawer and you're pulling all of these things out about your finances because you're ready to get real. And so as she did, here's what I discovered. I discovered that she had 6 figures in credit card debt. 6. Over $100,000 in credit cards, a bunch of credit cards. What was my response to her? She said, I want to invest some money. I want to grow some money. My response to her was, can't do it. You cannot invest money. She goes, what are you talking about? That's what you know. I will not work with you on investing money until you get rid of that credit card debt. Why? Because we use math. What does math say? Math says if you're paying 20% on credit cards, where else are you going to go and make that kind of money? You're not. So it makes no sense to go invest when you're paying 20% on a credit card. So what do we have to do? We got to get rid of that credit card first. So my advice to her as we're walking down this path is there's nothing else we can do until you chip away at that credit card debt. Once you get rid of those high interest rates on credit card, 20, 25, 27%, once you get rid of that, then you're going to be at a place where you can invest. So here's what I want to ask you. I want to ask you what percentage of your budget is going to debt replacement. Maybe you've overdone it on a house. Maybe your car payments are too high. I don't know. But if you put some percentages to it, you're going to have an idea. So we're going to mark it out. We're going to put percentages. We're going to talk honest about it. And then we're going to get real practical. Now, let me stop and say, where do you begin when you are able to save? So now we don't have these high percentages in credit cards and you're able to really start saving and investing. Where do you put your money? First of all, make sure you have 6 months living expenses set aside. You've heard that before. Very practical. 6 months living expenses set aside. Put it in an emergency fund. Put it in a savings account that doesn't have check writing privileges because I don't want it easy for you to get to. So set aside those 6 months. And then after you've done that, let's begin being practical and smart about where we save our money. So let me go against the popular thinking about saving money. There are those out there who will tell you that with your extra money, I want you to pay off your car. I'm going to say, not necessarily. There are those out there who are going to say, I want you to, with your extra money, let's get your house paid for. I'm going to say, not necessarily. Why? Because I'm going to use math. I'll give you an example. On my mortgage, my interest rate is 3.5%. Now, I know it's difficult to go find that today. You can't find that today. I doubt it ever gets back down that low. But I have a 3.5% interest rate, mortgage rate. Now, I want to ask you something. If I have extra money, would I put that extra money to paying my house off early? Absolutely not. Why? Why would I take extra money to pay off a 3.5% when I can make a lot more with that money? I'm going to take that money and rather than paying off a 3.5% mortgage rate, I'm going to go make 7% with it. I'm going to make 8% with it. What am I saying? I'm saying that we're just going to use math and make decisions based on math. I know people out there are cringing at what I'm saying because that's not what you've always heard. I also know a lot of you have already figured this out. Should you pay your car off early? Hopefully you already know the answer from what we've said. Depends. Depends on what your interest rate is. If you've got one of those 11 point or 13% rates on then yeah, we probably ought to get that paid down because that's too much. But if you've gotten one of those good deals, if you're making, I looked today and they have some, if you buy an electric vehicle, which I'm not suggesting you go buy one, but I'm saying you can get those at 1%, 2%. If I had a 2%, 3%, even a 5%, if that was my interest rate on my auto loan, would I pay it off early? No. I would take that money if I have extra money and I would put it somewhere where I can make 7, 8%. What am I doing? I'm using math. So use math. Now, let me give you one other thing because we're just being practical. Let me give you one other thing. Jay walks into my office. He happened to be a friend of mine. He's wanting to retire. Now follow this line of thinking. He's wanting to retire. He's in his latter 50s. He has to wait till he can get to that 59 and a half rule so he can have access to his 401k. If you take money out of your 401k before 59 and a half, you get a penalty and you have to pay the taxes. So he's wanting to know if he can retire. So he brought his statement. And when he laid his statement down, it literally said $1 million. He had $1 million in his 401k. I said, congratulations, Jay. Good job. So we began to talk about this. I said, so first of all, Jay, you do not have $1 million. He said, yes, I do. I said, Jay, you do not have $1 million. He said, this is my statement, $1 million. I said, Jay, all of this money is in a taxable bucket. So when you take the money out of this taxable bucket, if you're in a 30% tax bracket, that's $300,000 that's going to come out of that million in taxes. So now we've gone from $1 million to $700,000 because of taxes. I don't know why people forget that you have to pay taxes on 401ks. That's deferred compensation that you have to pay taxes on later, which, by the way, that's why if you have an opportunity to have a Roth 401k at the place you work, absolutely do it. Jump on that. A Roth 401k is so much better. You say, oh yeah, but I don't get a tax break. Well, I know, but think about this. We're in the lowest tax environment in the history of the world. But do you know how much debt our country's in? So do you think our tax brackets are going to go lower or going to go higher? They're only going to go higher. So you're going to pay less money in taxes now than you will down the road because of the debt our country's in. And we're now in a low tax environment. So take advantage of a Roth 401k if you can. All right, back to Jay. Jay, you don't have $1 million. You have $700,000 because you got to pay taxes. And then I said, Jay, how did you get $1 million in your 401k? He made a giant mistake. I mean, congratulations on the $1 million, but you made a huge mistake. I didn't tell it to him that way. I'm just telling you he did. So here's what happened. Over his 30 plus years at this particular place of employment, not only did he take advantage of the match in his 401k, but he gave everything he could give above the match. And he was so proud of himself that he put so much money into his 401k. Do you know what the mistake Jay made was? If you know what it was, put it in the comments, even though I'm getting ready to tell you. When you listen to this, put it in the comments if you knew. I want to know. Because most people don't. Here's the mistake that he made. One, absolutely, if your company matches, that's free money. If they're going to give you 3%, if you put in 3%, then do the 3% because they're going to give you free money. You can't beat free money. But here's the rule. Don't miss this. Do not give 1 penny above the match. Not 1 penny. That's what Jay had done over 30 years. For example, if your company says, all right, if you put in 3%, we'll put in 3%. You do that. Should you put in 4%? No, they're only matching 3%. You said, yeah, but I want to save more money. Well, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember what kind of bucket this is? This is a taxable bucket. Everything you put in above the match, you know what you're doing? You're saying to the government, oh, I have extra money. Let me put it in a bucket so you can charge me more taxes. Why would you do that? Why would you take extra money that they're not going to match and put it in a taxable bucket so that you can pay taxes on it later? Why not do this? Give to the match, but anything you have above that to save, put it in a non-taxable bucket. So I told Jay that. I said, Jay, let's do a little calculation. We did it. How much money he put into this taxable bucket and now has to pay taxes on, what that cost him in taxes, extra that he didn't have to do. Well, I said, Jay, what if we'd put all of that extra money in a bucket that doesn't get taxed? And this was Jay's response, and it's your response. He said, I didn't know there was a bucket like that. I didn't know there was a bucket that didn't get taxed. Well, there is. There's several buckets that don't get taxed. Part of it depends on your income. That's a whole nother discussion that I'm going to leave it to you to research, or you talk to your financial planner about the non-taxable buckets. But that's the rule of thumb. Don't just fill up a taxable bucket thinking that you're saving money for retirement. Be smarter than that. All right, let's wrap it up this way. Family budget, very good. Being intentional with our money, very important. Assigning percentages to each category, most people need to do that. And make sure that the percentages are not out of whack. That's why I gave you the percentages that should be there for each category. Be smart about how you pay it back. And for sure, don't get yourself in crazy credit card debt. I'm not one of those who's saying don't use your credit cards, because that's not practical. We do. And there's some good reasons why you use your credit card. A lot of people use your credit card every month and then they pay it off at the end of the month, but they're getting air flight miles and different things with their credit cards. I do that. Nothing wrong with that. I know some people tell you not to do that, but they're just talking to people who have no self-control. And they want you to burn your credit cards because you can't control it. Well, if that's you and you absolutely can't control it, then take your credit cards, put them in a Ziploc bag, fill the Ziploc bag up with water, seal it, stick it in the freezer, and freeze your credit card in that big block of water, frozen now, so that for you to use your credit card, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to melt that to get your credit card. I'm saying some people have such a lack of control, they have to do things like that. But I'm sure those I'm talking to do not have that lack of control. So there are smart ways that you can use your credit card as well. So there are some practical money tips. Hope that helps. Thanks for joining us at Faith Influencer, and we'll see you next time.